Conqueror is often considered to be the prime Kang, while other versions of the character are either Kang from alternate timelines or perhaps divergent versions of the character who split off through time to follow another path and become known by a completely different name, which sounds like an alternate version but it's kind of a little different. I'll touch somewhat on these alternates while trying to keep us mostly focused on the main Kang, Kang the Conqueror. Often known for being an Avengers and Fantastic Four villain, Kang the Conqueror is a villain from the future, who often manipulates the timeline in order to bring his plots to fruition. Himself, being a genius, he is also the kind of villain that can sometimes act as an ally to heroes when a threat is too great for them to handle it alone. Oh, and he's also a man of many chairs. He has a time chair that he literally uses to time travel, and he also has this sweet, floating, invisible beanbag chair because he's from the future. I hope in the future we all get invisible beanbag chairs, and guess what? We do, because this video is brought to you by Float, the new invisible beanbag chair. No, I'm just kidding. I wish though. If you invent an invisible beanbag chair, please sponsor us because I want one of those. Kang the Conqueror is kind of a weird villain with a very unique look, which I think is why so many are surprised to see him coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and were surprised when he was revealed to be, you know, kind of a villain that we'd be seeing. Initially, I was one of the people that also thought this was an unusual pick for a villain, especially with him appearing as the seeming main antagonist in the Ant-Man and the Wasp film Quantumania. But then I thought about it, and I realized just how serious of a threat Kang could be if he weren't reduced to simply being one iteration of the character. Kang is not just a universal threat like Thanos was after all, he is a potential multiversal threat. Fighting Kang is like fighting a one-man time-traveling army that is always multiple steps ahead of you, and also an army that seems to fight within itself and only creates more problems by doing that. And also a villain where anyone, even your closest allies, could secretly be manipulated by, or perhaps even just straight up be, a Kang variant. Now, as soon as I realized that the multiverse was what we were building towards in the next phase, Kang's presence made a lot more sense to me. Multiverse of Madness, What If, Loki, and even to a certain extent I would say WandaVision all seem to be pushing towards this idea of expanding the MCU beyond just the home universe. I mean, even Ms. Marvel kind of gets in on that idea with her being able to access another dimension, or at least, you know, we kind of allude to that, we see that a little bit in that series. With Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, I thought we might be going cosmic when we kind of got that tease where we're talking about where are the rings from, and now I think we're likely going beyond that to other dimensions. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ten Rings were like, I don't know, based in quantum something or doing some other universal stuff that came from another world entirely. Kang the Conqueror first appeared as a foe to the Avengers in issue number 8 of their first series. He was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and boy is he a true Jack Kirby creation if ever I have seen one. He's a lot of a lot, and also, I mean, that character design. Super Jack Kirby in the best of ways. While Kang was seemingly instantly defeated by having a radiation attack bounced back at him, forcing him to flee on his spaceship despite having somewhat of a natural immunity to radiation thanks to being from the future, this wouldn't nearly be the last we'd see of him. And I would say he almost instantly made his mark as an iconic character in that issue. Man, in the future, what do we have to look forward to? Invisible beanbag chairs and apparently some level of radiation immunity. Sounds pretty cool to me if that's our future. Kang the Conqueror is said to hail from the 30th century, believed to be the future or a version of the future of Earth 616. Kang's home reality, however, is known as Earth 6311, sometimes also referred to as Other Earth. Other Earth is a little bit different from the main reality in that there were no dark ages on this world, so that's also why we don't just call it, you know, the future of 616, and honestly, even if we did, we'd probably still give it another number because we never want to be too specific in the comics with what the future really holds. Instead, this alternate Earth skipped the era known as the Dark Ages. Thanks to rapid advancement, they would end up with a colony on the moon, known as Luna, but unfortunately would succumb to war when both the Earth and the moon colony clashed with one another. As a result, the moon would be destroyed entirely, completely obliterated, and its pieces would rain down on Earth, causing massive destruction ocean and leaving the people of planet Earth largely scattered and isolated. Other Earth would also be a world that Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel Richards of Earth 616, would travel to, unite together, and ultimately lead alongside his wife, Cassandra, who hailed herself from Earth 6311, helping Other Earth to recover from a devastating war. Cassandra herself, I believe, is a princess in that future, so, you know, that happens and then you can rule together. However, Cassandra would eventually come to covet the power she held and become known as the villain Warlord, unbeknownst to her husband. But eventually the Fantastic Four would travel to Other Earth and help to defeat Warlord. Years later, Cassandra and Nathaniel's children would rule, truly ushering in an era of peace. It was during this time that Nathaniel Richards was born. No, not Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel. His possible future descendant, Nathaniel Richards. Are you confused yet? Although some signs actually point to this Nathaniel, who would become Kang, as a true descendant of Victor Von Doom instead, aka Dr. Doom, the Fantastic Four villain. And others still seem to reconcile both of these records, implying that Nathaniel Richards of Earth 6311 was actually descended from both Reed and Victor, somehow. When I say that, I always imagine like a ship of Reed and Victor together and they're like in love and then somehow Nathaniel's descended from that, but that's not exactly what we mean here, I don't think. When Nathaniel was just a teenager, one of his first other personas entered the chat. This was the person many of us got excited about as potentially existing in the MCU. Iron Lad. Iron Lad is a member of the Young Avengers, acting as the team's version of Iron Man. When Iron Man ends up getting help from a kid named Harley Keener in Iron Man 3, many people believed this could actually be a version of Iron Lad and we could see Iron Lad in the MCU. And now, with Kang being introduced into the MCU in Quantumania, many believe we could yet see a more comic book adaptation of Iron Lad via Jonathan Majors. Perhaps another alternate version of Kang, where instead Kang becomes the hero known as Iron Lad. This current theory comes from the comics, where Iron Lad, member of the Young Avengers, is later revealed to be a teenage version of Nathaniel Richards of Earth 6311, aka a past version of Kang, before he obviously became Kang. Iron Lad comes to Earth 616 to hide, and hopefully seek help from the Avengers to protect him from his future self, refusing to grow up and become Kang. He's basically looking for a way to avoid that. In fact, Kang the Conqueror would even end up having a comic series with his younger self, Iron Lad, in 2021, titled Kang the Conqueror. Now this 5-issue mini would be all about Kang basically trying to teach his younger self and young Nathaniel wrestling with his own fate and destiny. Kang was basically trying to get him to accept him becoming Kang and like teach him how to be like the best Kang he can be. This wouldn't be the only version of young Kang that we'd come to know though. In addition to Iron Lad, there is also Kid Immortus, I believe in comic book history, who came into existence following Nathaniel's time as Iron Lad. While Iron Lad made his first appearance in the mid-noughts in Young Avengers issue number 1, Kid Immortus made his first appearance back in 2013 in FF issue number 8, the second FF volume. Not to be confused with the second Fantastic Four volume, which is a different title. So when I'm saying FF, I literally mean the letters FF. And I know that's confusing because FF is often used as a short form when we're talking about the Fantastic Four. But this time around, well, it is also being used in that context in terms of, you know, what the book is about. It's also literally just FF if you're looking to follow up on that series and you're trying to Google it. Even when we aren't directly talking about time travel stuff in Kang's history, it can be confusing to follow. So hopefully you're following along with me here. Let me get my chart. Are you following along all this weirdness? Despite these adventures through time and the attempts young Nathaniel made to avoid ever becoming Kang, he would end up doing just that, becoming Kang. This part of the story, however, hasn't really been documented yet and is a bit of a gap in his history. What we do know is that Kang and other versions of him across time do exist, implying that even after his time as Kid Immortus and Iron Lad, Nathaniel Richards returned to his own timeline and eventually would decide to time travel, although it's unclear if his memories of being either of these younger personas remains with him or not. Eventually, Nathaniel would turn to time travel as a way to apparently alleviate boredom, coming to the ancient past and settling down in Egypt, where he would be known by another name, Ramatut. Nathaniel would indeed become Pharaoh Ramatut, living as a ruler in Egypt until the time-traveling Fantastic Four showed up and stopped him. Because, you know, that's what they do. Following this, Ramatut attempted to return back to his own timeline from there, but he got caught in a time storm along the way, as I guess is warrant to happen when you are time traveling. Admittedly, you know, I don't recall hearing of many other time storms in the history of Marvel Comics, but they must happen, and you know, maybe they're just a little bit more rare. We only hear of them every now and then. I think Wolverine did end up in a time storm once with Puck when they traveled kind of through a picture back to a war-torn 1930s Spain, but you know, other than Kang, I think that's about all I can think of. Let me know in the comments all the time storms you can think of. Oh wait, I actually think my insult of time storms has caused one to head our way. Oh no, hurry, click the like button to save me from being displaced through time. Help! Whew, okay, thanks to those of you who clicked like, that was a close one. And to all of you who did not click like, I want you to know that my life flashed before my eyes. Caught in the time storm, Ramatut ended up displaced in modern day Earth 616. There he met his possible ancestor Dr. Doom and was inspired to give up his Ramatut persona to become more like Doom. Which honestly, fair enough. If I met Dr. Doom, I'd also probably be like, you seem cool, I'm gonna do what you're doing. This was how Nathaniel would go on to become Scarlet Centurion. It was also later revealed that the time storm he was caught in was actually all done by Immortus, yet another time-divergent version of Kang. Apparently, Immortus created time storms to prevent Kang from creating certain alternate reality selves and to stop him from, I guess, you know, like tampering too much with the timeline. Often in comics, Kang's most dangerous enemy tends to be like another version of Kang, and Immortus and Kang have definitely both acted against one another throughout their histories. Scarlet Centurion didn't quite work out for Kang as an identity. He ended up encountering the Avengers in the Avengers 1968 annual, and this would be similar to how his first ever comics appearance would go, in the sense that he would end up being pretty handily defeated here. This prompted him to abandon the Scarlet Centurion look and name and return once more to being Ramatut, which, after all, I suppose, had been much more successful in comparison, so that makes sense to me. As Ramatut, Nathaniel would once more attempt to return home to the future of the 30th century, but alas, more time storms. Ramatut goes to check the weather. Dang time storms, time storms, time storms, jeez! All weather channels are forecasting time storms all this week. How am I supposed to travel through time in this terrible weather? This is awful. Also, this weatherman, Immortus, you know, he sure looks familiar to me. Oh well, whoever he is, he certainly is a handsome devil, I'll say that. Once more being tossed up in another time storm, Ramatut instead missed his stop in the 30th century, instead being catapulted even further into the future, into the 40th century. There, he discovered primitive beings fighting with sort of past technological weapons they no longer seemed to fully understand. At this point, Ramatut fancied himself a sort of a master of past tech and weapons and figured, you know, screw it, I could just rule these people. I have the knowledge to do it, so why wouldn't I? And so Nathaniel reinvented himself once more as Kang the Conqueror. Finally, we're there! He succeeded in conquering this far-flung future, not just the planet, but beyond, building his own galactic empire. However, Kang still found himself thinking back to the past and the modern era of Earth 616. Not fully satisfied with what he had accomplished here in the future, he set out to become the ruler of Earth 616 as well. It's also believed that his ambition to rule the time period of Earth 616 was also tied to the fact that he'd heard a tale of a celestial Madonna, who had become the mother of the most powerful man in all of known history. Basically, Kang wanted to become the baby daddy of that most powerful figure, which is kind of a weird thought when, like me, you know that the celestial Madonna turned out to be the hero Mantis, and that her baby would grow up to be the half-human, half-Kotati Sequoia, aka Koya, who recently was one of the main villains of the Empire event a few years back. I wonder if there is a future where instead of the Kotati resurrected version of Swordsman being that baby's dad, Kang is his dad instead? I would read that what if it does not yet exist. We'll have to wait to find out, as that is all the time we have for this video. We didn't explain as much as I wanted to, but we did explain how Kang came to be Kang, and you know, some other identities he took up on his way to becoming the Conqueror that we all now know today. We now know what motivates him, even if it is a kind of a weird life goal, to be honest. Let us know down in the comments if you would like us to continue this history and recount some more of Kang's most convoluted attempts to conquer Earth, including his time as Victor Timely, which would be coming up next. Where does Santa come from? The age-old question so many of us have been wondering what the answer to is for years. I'm still wondering, but don't worry, worry, children and adults of all kinds, I'm gonna tell you the answer. At least I will tell you in regards to what we know of Santa from his origin over at Marvel Comics. For the real Santa, I can't really say. I'm sworn to secrecy. Santa gets his existence and power from humanity's belief in him though at Marvel Comics. Kinda like the gods from the Distinguished Competition, aka DC Comics, or at least the gods from DC's Vertigo imprint. The gods showcased in Neil Gaiman's The Sandman seem to get their power from humanity's belief and need for them. So as some gods become less influential and important in humanity's day-to-day life, they also become less powerful, basically shadows of their former selves. With Santa, there are 3 people he is often mistaken for, and whose origins people often mistakenly attribute to him. Though if Santa was brought to life by kind of like all 3 of these legendary figures, then I suppose in a way it's not a mistake because all of their origins kind of are his origins. Anyways, who are these 3 legends, you ask? Well, one story suggests that Santa Claus is possibly actually none other than, or at least inspired by, the story of Odin's generosity one midwinter night. That's right, we are talking about Odin, the Allfather of Asgard. Some people think of Santa as Odin. Oh boy. This story takes place on a night where a village's midwinter's feast was under threat, while at the same time, so was the existence of Asgard. Asgard had been threatened by Grylak the Greater, a troll who threatened to destroy the realm of Asgard with an asteroid if he was not given control of it by the Allfather. You know Odin is not gonna just do that, but anyways. At the same time on Earth, Sigurd and his crew were returning home to the feast when their boat was caught in a really bad storm. Sia, Sigurd's wife, prayed for the safety of her husband and his crew to Odin. Odin, being the wise god he is, and the super nice god he is, at least in Marvel Comics, decided to solve both problems simultaneously. He had Thor gather materials for the feast from Asgard, find linens, food, and wine, then he had Thor use Mjolnir to obliterate the asteroid. The flash of light from the destructive explosion helped Sigurd and his crew sail on safely home. Odin brought the resources gathered to Sia as gifts, disappearing on a sleigh afterwards pulled by flying rams before Sigurd returned, calling out, "A good midwinter to all, and to all a good life." Another theory suggests that Santa is actually the spirit of the winter season, or at least once was. This idea is inspired by an alleged custom from pre-medieval Britain. The custom involved elders of communities dressing up in furs and being referred to as Old Winter while traveling from home to home. The thought here was that those who showed kindness to Old Winter would also be showed kindness by the winter season. Respect and kindness equals respect and kindness. I like it, makes sense. Following the rise of Christianity, the central character of the custom was changed somewhat from Old Winter to Old Christmas, and then to Old Father Christmas, before finally becoming simply known as Father Christmas. Finally, one of the other common stories, possibly the most common story in modern times, is that of Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas was a man from the area near what we now know as Turkey, hailing from the 4th century where he became the Bishop of Myra. Nicholas was known for his kind heart, his giving nature, his love of children, and for making miracles happen. Ooh, miracles. Many stories were told about him, but the most famous one involves him helping a family to pay for their daughter's dowries by sneaking gold into their house. I don't know why you wouldn't just give them the gold, but hey. After a few attempts, he succeeded in this one night when he had managed to get a bag of gold down the family's chimney. The gold supposedly appeared the morning after in stockings that had been left out to dry over the fireplace. Ooh, Christmassy. Nicholas did not brag about his good deeds and himself was pretty humble, but eventually word of his charity and the miracles he seemingly caused spread, causing him to become celebrated by people even outside of Myra. People often made a habit of attributing unexpected gifts and mysterious acts of charity to him. Following his death, a church was built in his honor. Tales of St. Nicholas would eventually make their way to the ears of Russian royalty, who decided to make St. Nicholas the patron saint of Russia. Tales also spread to the Netherlands, where he was initially known as Sint Nicholas, then Sinterklaas, which would go on to inspire the name Santa Claus. Get it? December 5th became a day of giving in his honor, being the day before he died. However, this tradition would then be combined with the story of the birth of Jesus, with December 25th becoming the day that we celebrate instead, now known as Christmas. Santa, however, is kind of like a combination of all these figures, but also is his own thing. When humanity's belief combined with the 3 legends and spiritual energy, we got a recipe for one Santa Claus, please. Santa is believed to be a physical manifestation of generosity, something that all 3 legends share in theme. But he also might be a mutant. more on that later. After coming into being, Santa set up his home base in Finland, initially in a city known as Korventunturi. He would ride around on horseback delivering presents on Christmas morning. Later he'd upgrade his operation after he met and married Mrs. Claus. They would move to the North Pole and create a workshop there before expanding his empire further by employing a workforce of elves, mainly made up of the light elves of Elfheim, to help them in creating gifts and toys. In regards to Santa's first appearance in Marvel Comics, it's super weird, but that's kinda what I love about it, so here we go. Santa's first appearance happened in November of 1955 in Strange Tales issue number 34, where he appeared as a magical, jolly fellow who also has a really sweet red car. Now that's my kind of Santa. The story begins at a garage and service station where we are introduced to Sammy Glenn, who works as a station attendant. Sammy is apparently both a genius and a man with a big generous heart, but simply with the worst luck in all of his life. After all, how else did he end up working here? Could it be a lack of ambition, or I don't know, simply due to his low self-esteem? Definitely not. It's just something that happened to poor Sammy and that he has zero control over, I'm sure. Sammy spends some time feeling bad for himself, inner monologue style, before getting shamed by an old friend, Ben Graham, who stops by to get gas, with Ben taking every opportunity to rag on Sammy for being too nice. Because apparently the theme of Sammy's life is nice guys finish last while jerks only ever succeed, I guess. The next day at work, a mysterious man arrives. He ends up presumably getting a top up on gas and a car tune-up because he decides to leave his car there for 6 hours. That's gotta be some kind of tune-up, that's a long time. The man asks Sammy to watch his things closely because he refuses to lock up anything and secure his own valuables. So that's on Sammy. Even though Sammy is tipped well and presumably the car is there to have something done to it for 6 hours, Sammy decides to dress up in the man's clothes and takes his car for a joyride to give himself a taste of the high life. He drives back home to rub his pretend success in everybody's face. Yep, what a nice guy he is. I'll parade my success in front of their bulging eyes. Wes Morrow, the banker, Madge Grammer, the girl who turned me down, Jim Leverett, the lawyer. I'll look up Jim first. So it turns out Jim's dead. Madge looks like she's about to die after having 4 kids and apparently a failure of a husband, and Wes is now homeless. Disappointed in how everyone that came out of his hometown, including himself, turned out to be a failure, Sammy heads to an exclusive executive club for a drink before returning the car, and is surprised that he actually succeeds to get in. Another theme in this weird holiday story: fake it till you make it. Sammy meets a woman who mistakes him for another club member and asks him what he does. When he tells her that he's in between jobs but is hoping to get a job in engineering research, she decides to just give him her number. Super realistic, I think. A man overhears Sammy is looking for work in engineering and straight up offers him a job in the field, because the man thinks Sammy is a bona fide club member. I can't believe it! I'm Sammy Glenn, the guy who never had a break in his life! Suddenly, a beautiful woman falls for me, the president of a big corporation offers me a top job. From nobody, suddenly I'm somebody. I have money, success. Why? Because Santa, that's why. The final panels reveal that the garage calendar shows today as Christmas. And who is the mystery man who left his car, suit, and belongings unsecured? Why, Santa, of course. Apparently, if you pity yourself enough and temporarily steal Santa's belongings for an afternoon, you too can have it all, thanks to the miracle of Christmas. This is where I'd have glitter and I'd throw it. Hold up! As a gift to us, why not like this video and subscribe for more Top 10 Nerd? Seriously, the miracle of Christmas, you gotta do it, okay? Bye.
Now we're gonna move on to Santa Claus's major appearances. A lot of Santa's appearances have been in passing, like in the Strange Tales of the Unusual short story where a Scrooge-like man has a change of heart during Christmas and Santa just waltzes on by and at the end of the story and says, "Good job." Now, because that's rather boring, I'm going to talk about some of his more interesting appearances after his first really weird one. Starting with his notable appearances in Howard the Duck Volume 2 Issue 3, with a release date of December 4th, 1979 and a cover date of February 1980. Because the world is constantly changing and we as humans as a species are constantly advancing and growing, and because Santa is hella old, he decides to try and modernize to fit in. He cuts down his beard to be more slick, he rebuilds his sleigh to be self self-propelled using Roxxon Oil's high-octane fuel instead of subjecting his reindeer to the emotional and physical stress of doing the job, and he also opened up a nuclear power plant and a gas station up in the North Pole. Unfortunately, one of the villainous workers at the plant, named Greedy Killerwatt, decided he was going to take over Christmas as revenge against society for a mutation that made him look like a light bulb. He convinced a convict named Pinball Lizard, who Santa had hired for his fun and games department, to try and bring Santa down by not putting enough gas in his sleigh so that the big man would crash. And in his absence, they would take over the toy workshop, forcing the elves to make mass-produced toys that just straight up suck. Luckily though, when Santa's sleigh crashed, the crash happened in Cleveland, where Santa ran into Howard the Duck. They, Howard and Santa, return to the North Pole, where a battle breaks out between Santa, Howard, and the loyal forces of North Pole against the mutated villains and their mutated animal minions. But that wasn't his only Howard the Duck story. In Howard the Duck Holiday Special Volume 1, Issue 1 from 1996, we got a story called Wreck the Malls with Hydra's Folly, where the old jolly guy becomes just upset with humanity's lack of faith and belief, so he sells the entire gift-making and giving Christmas enterprise to Hydra. This time, Howard the Duck was working as a mall Santa, and he gets recruited by an elf alongside a bunch of other mall Santas to save Christmas. Now his next big appearance, and probably one of Santa's most notable ones, was in Marvel Holiday Special Volume 1, released on November 19th, 1991, with a cover date of December 1991. In a little story called A Miracle a Few Blocks Down from 34th Street, 'twas the day before Christmas, and all through the Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, Cerebro detected what it called the most powerful mutant ever registered, who had just miraculously appeared in New York's Rockefeller Center. The X-Men obviously went off to investigate, but this massively powerful mutant was also detected by a group of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, who also went to try and capture the mutant for their own evil purposes, resulting in a clash between the two factions. But this mutant just happened to be Santa Claus himself, who used his insane power to briefly transform the Brotherhood into toys. He teleported the X-Men away, erased everyone's memory, and then made it snow, giving New York the first white Christmas in a hot minute. Next up, in Sensational She-Hulk Volume 1, number 8, and also number 36, released August 1st, 1989 and December 3rd, 1991, respectively. At this time in his life, Santa Claus had decided that, with his ability to know who was naughty and nice, he would make an absolutely show-stealing detective. So that's what he does, becoming Nick St. Christopher. And together with She-Hulk, they take on the investigation of a killer. He even gets the hots for old Jennifer Walters, which gets Mrs. Claus a little bit jealous. By the end of the story, he gives Jen a gift that allows her to temporarily transform into her human form so she can have a normal Christmas with her family. So nice. Now for the next Santa story, we can look to Marvel Age Volume 1, number 109 from February of 1992. This story, told by Captain America to some kids, takes us back in time to December 1943, when the leader of the German Axis forces during World War II, who will remain nameless, captured Santa Claus to try and destroy the morale of the USA. But President Franklin Roosevelt sent the heroes Nick Fury, Captain America, and James Bucky Barnes to rescue old Saint Nick. There was also Marvel Holiday Spectacular magazine from 2009, which contained the story from a continuity that never existed: Santa Claus versus the Illuminati. Here, Iron Man calls together the Illuminati because it turns out that all of Santa's reindeer were actually Skrulls. With no way to make his Christmas deliveries the traditional way, the Illuminati instead give Claus the Infinity Gems and Infinity Gauntlet, which actually corrupted the Saint. Luckily, Namor got him with a snowball to the schnauzer that knocked him over and caused the gauntlet to fall off. Instead of giving Santa the assembled Infinity Gauntlet, Iron Man just makes Santa some robotic reindeer. Why he didn't do that in the first place? I don't know, I just work here. Last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, we have got to talk about Deadpool Volume 7, Issue number 7, released in December of 2018. Discovering that on Christmas Day no one had delivered their presents, a group of enraged children, who seem to be between the age of 5 and 9, find Deadpool's hideout and hire the mercenary with money from a Go Pay Me campaign to take out the big Claus himself for failing them. You see, Santa has been doing doing his thing for a long time, but that doesn't make him any good at running a business. Instead, one of his elves named Tinsel took the lead in organizing all of the operations of the North Pole. But Tinsel wanted to bring in outside help to cut the cost of their operation, and Santa ain't no sellout, except for that one time with Hydra. So he refuses. Tinsel, being the little troublemaker that he is, went around and convinced all the other elves that Santa was oppressing them, and he convinced them to all do a little walkout. Santa didn't take this too well and let himself go and became a massive manic mess. But like all of these stories, you'll have to read it yourself for all the fun little details because we're moving on. But before we do that, just some honorable mentions. Absolutely check out Power Man and Iron Fist's Sweet Christmas Annual from 2016 to see Santa take on Krampus himself, and King in Black Iron Man / Doom #1 from 2021 to see those two directly take on Santa and question their own beliefs. Now, we're actually moving on.
Powers and abilities. Marvel's Santa has a wide variety of powers and abilities, but the source of his powers seems to be a bit inconsistent. In the Marvel Holiday Special of 1991, which Adam already talked about, where Cerebro informs them that it has located the most powerful mutant on Earth, this implies that the powers he uses in his appearances are manifestations of his mutation, such as when he turns the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants into action figures and then teleports the X-Men away from him with a touch of his nose, wiping their minds of the interaction in the process. However, in a breakdown of the character featured in Marvel Holiday Spectacular 2009, where they talk about his powers, he is said to be using magic to accomplish his feats, and they never bring up the fact that he's a mutant, let alone the most powerful one on Earth. There is some contention as to whether the ability to use magic is a mutant power or a separate thing, but whatever the source of his abilities, they are undeniably amazing. They are for the most part similar to the powers attributed to most other versions of the character, but with that slight Marvel weirdness. He is immortal, having looked like an old man for centuries, and seems to have reality-altering powers, being able to turn people into toys as mentioned before. Although his flying reindeer were apparently a gift from Odin, he can also magically empower animals, such as when he made a group of huskies capable of flight when his reindeer were rendered unavailable. Lending further credence to the magic theory, his strength is doubled on Christmas Eve, making him capable of lifting up to 2 tons. He also accomplishes many of his feats with the help of magical artifacts. For example, his sack is really a tesseract that creates a portal to another dimension that he uses to store the various gifts he needs to deliver. Although he is usually drawn as a white guy, he's actually using a psychic mirroring ability that will make him appear as the same race as whoever is looking at him. Speaking of psychic powers, he of course is able to determine who is naughty and who is nice, which he also uses to be the world's greatest detective, like when he teamed up with She-Hulk in Sensational She-Hulk #8. Perhaps his most impressive feat of magic was in the Gwenpool Holiday Special, when he removed himself from Christmas to take a year off and made everyone on Earth forget him, and made it so that it was Galactus who gave gifts to the well-behaved children. Although this did cause a side effect of other holidays being affected, such as when Thanksgiving became Pantsgiving, where everyone gives each other tight hot pants. He prefers not to use his powers for combat, but that doesn't mean he is a slouch in that department. In his appearance in Deadpool Volume 7 #7, he and Deadpool enter an intense brawl, and though he is ultimately no match for Deadpool, he does hold his own in the fight. Despite his incredible powers, he is often depicted being kidnapped by supervillains in his appearances and needing to be rescued by the heroes. It's frankly kind of bizarre that he can apparently rewrite reality to make Galactus the bringer of gifts, but can't escape from a comically oversized bear trap on Dr. Doom's roof without help.
Who is Mr. Sinister? Mr. Sinister was originally known as Nathaniel Essex. He is one of the greatest mutant geneticists the world over. Over the years, he has perfected the cloning process, created chimeras, sparked new life, altered his own DNA to make himself mutant, manipulated others' powers, increasing, decreasing, or better focusing them, and has augmented victims with his own DNA, altering them forever by kind of bonding them to himself. Before we travel back in time to the beginning of Mr. Sinister's weird and wacky story and origin, let's talk about his comic book origins in regards to his first chronological appearance. Mr. Sinister was first mentioned following the devastating attack on the Morlocks, often referred to in the comics as the Mutant Massacre. Following the attack in issue 212 of Uncanny X-Men, we get the first mention of him. Wolverine is hot on the trail of those responsible attempting to hunt them down when he runs into Sabretooth, because of course Sabretooth is involved in this dastardly plot plot. Startled by Sabretooth's appearance in the sewers, but not at all shocked, Wolverine exclaims, "You're part of this?" Sabretooth responds, "Yep," adding, "Mr. Sinister's dealing a game that don't allow for wild cards like the Morlocks, or you X-chumps either. So he sent the Marauders to resolve the situation, cause we're the very best there is at what we do, like you used to be." This was the first mention of Mr. Sinister, who would make his first visual appearance almost 10 issues later in issue 221 of the series. Sporting pointed teeth and a scowl that to gaze upon would likely leave you paralyzed with fear, Mr. Sinister's ghostly white nightmarish face appears on the very first page of this issue. He lets out a growl expressing his disappointment in how the team have failed to eliminate one of his creations, Madeline Pryor, who he wanted destroyed and disposed of to cover up his own connection to her. "You failed me, Marauders, and failure is something Mr. Sinister does not tolerate." I'm here for it. I'm here for the creepy stuff. Mr. Sinister is one of my favorites. Mr. Sinister's connection to both the Morlocks and Madeline Pryor run even deeper than you can imagine though, and extend all the way back to Victorian England, and the character's origins as he transformed from Nathaniel Essex, esteemed scientist, to something much more, well, sinister. As a child, Nathaniel Essex loved watching the busy flow of traffic. He enjoyed studying the patterns of people's movement and predicting which way people would go, observing that they always seemed to follow preordained paths. This would be the beginning of Essex's obsession with predictions. In the limited team-up series, Further Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, we learn more about Essex's origins. I also just love the art in this series. It's kind of a cool series to revisit. I like that I get to do this video so I can revisit it. Here we learned that as a man, Mr. Sinister was actually a respected scientist who married Rebecca Milbury, back when he was of course Nathaniel Essex. Tragically, their young son passed away as the result of multiple birth defects. Struggling with grief, Nathaniel coped by burying himself in his work, struggling to accept the passing of his son. Essex became obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution. He believed too many scientists were limited by their morals when it came to ideas and experiments. Why do we have morals? Ugh, what a waste of time! I don't have time for these morals. Essex predicted the existence of mutants, believing they would emerge as a result of natural evolution. He predicted that humanity would evolve rapidly thanks to what he referred to as Essex factors. You know you're a scientist when you're naming things after yourself. As a result of this far-out theory and questionable experiments, he was disgraced and kicked out of the Royal Society, though really due to his questionable experiments, which were pretty Frankensteinish to be honest. Around this time, Essex would ally with his first ever team of Marauders. Not these Marauders. These Marauders! And have them collect all sorts of deformed ne'er-do-wells from the streets of London to become his unwilling test subjects in mad science experiments. While working for Essex, the Marauders woke up the powerful mutant known as Apocalypse, who had been in hibernation. Apocalypse asked to meet the leader of the Marauders and was taken to him, posing as a man intrigued by Essex's theories on evolution. During their interaction, Essex learned that his predictions had been correct, as En Sabinur was Apocalypse, a mutant. The duo ran into a time-traveling Cyclops and Phoenix, who were sent back in time by the Ascani. While Nathaniel is tempted to join Apocalypse here, he ultimately instead decides to passionately commit himself to his family and his wife running home, because Rebecca does not like how obsessed he has become of late with his work. Unfortunately, upon returning home, he learns that his wife, Rebecca, has learned of his secret, very creepy experiments and his prisoners, and has freed them all. As a result of the stress of this revelation, she also went into early labor and is now basically on the brink of death. While on her deathbed, she refuses to forgive Nathaniel, labeling him as utterly and contemptibly sinister. Whew, fair. Rebecca's speaking some truths as she dies. Mourning the death of his wife and loss of his family, he ultimately returns to Apocalypse, deciding to become his ally in the end. I mean, I guess what else are you gonna do? Apocalypse is a mutant who perfectly represents Essex's hypothesis regarding mutants and evolution. Apocalypse is his theory in essence come to life. Apocalypse painfully genetically mutates Essex using celestial technology, making him his first prelate, which is also, you know, just how Apocalypse do. With Nathaniel taking for himself the name his wife gave to him on her deathbed, Sinister. Sinister allowed Apocalypse to remove his humanity from him, leaving him with no moral code to speak of going forward. However, in his fight against Cyclops and Phoenix, he found himself pretty fascinated by them. Believing Apocalypse, his new master, to be cruel, without purpose, and therefore insane, Sinister decided to reject him, betraying him by unleashing a deadly plague that Apocalypse had him make, but only releasing it on his master, thereby forcing Apocalypse to return to hibernation. Sinister would go on to say that cruelty without purpose was ignorance, and that ignorance was the greatest enemy of science. But if you're cruel and you have a purpose, then you're just apparently a great scientist to Mr. Sinister. Phoenix and Cyclops returned to the future, and while their mission to seemingly stop Apocalypse was successful, it would turn out that the true plan Clan Ascani had for them was to inspire Sinister to set into motion plans that would one day lead to the birth of Nathan Summers, aka Nathan Dayspring, aka Cable. So yeah, that's how closely tied Mr. Sinister is to the Summers family. His obsession surrounding the Summers and the Greys in the future would actually come from his interaction with their future selves who had journeyed into the past. Wild, right? I hope you're following me with this timey-wimey stuff. In the 1999 Gambit comic series, we learned Sinister had moved from England to America. Sinister's appearance in Gambit series also makes sense given their history, where Sinister was shown to be a regretful ally, later enemy, who Gambit becomes indebted to. Although that wouldn't happen until the future. The future past? The future. Confusing. Time travel again. But we'll talk about that part later anyways. While in the Americas, Sinister would adopt the name of Dr. Nathan Milbury, taking his wife's surname. He would run the Essex Clinic as an obstetrician. There he would also continue to conduct morally devoid experiments, and would even continue to study the genetics of Daniel Summers, one of his prisoners and test subjects back in England who had escaped. Or at least Daniel had thought he escaped Essex. Apparently he didn't, unfortunately. Sinister would also experiment on Amanda Mueller, and made deals with her to acquire several of her babies after they were born for his own purposes. Amanda Mueller would go on to become one of the founders of Weapon X, an evil woman tied to the Summers family tree known as Black Womb, and Daniel Summers also tied. For more on Amanda Mueller and Daniel, you can check out our part 2 video for attempting to explain the Summers family tree. Despite Gambit not actually being alive at the time, in terms of he wasn't really born yet because it's the past, Sinister would first meet him in 1891. This was possible because Gambit and a shapeshifting mutant named Courier had traveled back in time. Upon meeting Sinister, the two made their first deal. Sinister agreed to free Thieves Guild members and give Gambit information in exchange for a sample of Courier's genome. Sinister would blend Courier's genes and abilities with his own and end up teaming up temporarily with Gambit. However, the Thieves Guild members involved would have their memories wiped and therefore would not remember these events. So, in case you're wondering why they don't remember, that's why. At this point, Sinister was not yet Mr. Sinister, to be clear, but was known simply as just Sinister. The name change might not seem like a big difference, but in regards to the character and his identity, it actually is. Mr. Sinister had a completely different personality in comparison, being more feral in nature. This personality actually developed after Sinister returned to his old home, the Milbury House, in 1895, to conduct more experiments. It was then that he learned he was dying and developed the Mr. Sinister persona. He had a kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing going on in regards to this split, struggling with episodes as he continued to deteriorate. Essex would run into Mystique and Destiny, who found him as part of their own investigation. They had him taken to Bedlam, where he died overnight. However, this wouldn't be the end for Sinister, as we learn in Immortal X-Men issue number 8. Mystique and Destiny would learn that prior to his death, Sinister had cloned himself 4 times, with the goal of surviving in clone forms to the 20th century and beyond. Each one of his clones was marked by a symbol belonging to a different card deck suit. The Diamond clone is still known as Mr. Sinister and is a mutant. The clone of Clubs we know as Dr. Stasis, who appears to be human. The other remain unknown at the time of this recording, though I imagine the Sins of Sinister event will shed some more light on their stories, and we might actually know more if there's something that I missed or didn't read, which, if that's true, let me know in the comments because I'd love to read it.
Let's get started with his origins. The High Evolutionary made his first appearance in 1966's Thor, number 134, but we didn't learn the finer details of his origin until the Evolutionary War event, which started in 1988's X Factor Annual number 3 and was told in backup stories across the annuals of several different Marvel comics that year. career, including Punisher, Web of Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Avengers, X-Men, and more. The High Evolutionary was originally a British scientist named Herbert Edgar Wyndham, who, inspired by the work of Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister, was trying to crack the code of evolution by using a machine that he'd built in his mother's basement to force rats to evolve. But though he could alter the DNA, all of his test subjects died in the experiments. He was invited to attend the 1923 International Conference on Genetics in Geneva, Switzerland, where he met an American scientist about his age named Jonathan Drew, who was studying arthropodic zoology at Yale. They became friends, but the conference was a disappointment for Herbert, as the keynote speaker advised him that his attempts to accelerate genetic material would be disastrous if he attempted it before scientists successfully managed to map the genetic code. Herbert and Jonathan got drunk together to drown their sorrows, but while Herbert was stumbling through an alley, he was approached by a mysterious figure, who we would later learn was actually the Inhuman known as Fedar in disguise. Fedar gave Herbert a package of papers which contained a blueprint for breaking the genetic code so that he could continue his research. Herbert built his machine while studying at Oxford, but was so focused on his research that he failed his classes and was expelled. He moved back into his mother's house and performed his first successful experiment, transforming his pet Dalmatian into a dog man. The creature escaped, and confused hunters shot it, causing Herbert to realize that he needed to find a place to continue his work where, quote, his subjects will be free from unthinking bumblers. He got in contact with Jonathan Drew, who had just inherited some land in the Balkans. They partnered up, and Herbert, Jonathan, his wife Miriam, and their daughter Jessica Drew set out to Wundagore Mountain. Life on Wundagore. While conducting their research, the two scientists discovered that the mountain was rich with uranium, which they began mining to finance their work, and the designing of an advanced lab that could fly away to space if need be. Fedar showed up again and gave Herbert a tribe of the underground creatures known as the Moloids, who would mine the uranium as well as construct the lab for Herbert. Things seemed to be going well until Jessica became sick with radiation sickness, because the two scientists apparently never thought that raising a child next to a uranium mine might be a bad idea. Herbert placed Jessica in cryostasis to slow the radiation's progression, while her father injected her with the spider extract serum that he had been working on, thinking it would allow her body to adapt to the radiation for reasons I'm not entirely clear on. Unfortunately, the serum needed time to metabolize, and Jessica Drew was left in stasis, Nora Freeze style. Her mother became distraught and left, but was mauled by a werewolf and killed. Jonathan left the lab in his grief, and Herbert set about finding the werewolf, constructing a suit of armor that could protect him from injury. He found the werewolf in his lab feeding on the Moloids and captured the wolf. Having completed the construction job, the Moloids disappeared back underground, never to be seen by Herbert again. The High Evolutionary began using his genetic accelerator to evolve animals into animal men. He would then submit them to educational programming in order to raise their intelligence. The werewolf was actually his neighbor, Baron Gregor Rusoff, who the High Evolutionary would confine on nights with a full moon in exchange for being allowed to study the Baron when he was in wolf form. Jonathan Drew showed up again, but claimed to actually be a dead mage named Magnus, who had taken the mystical Darkhold from the evil Morgan Le Fay and had been killed, but was now controlling Herbert's old partner. He warned Herbert that an evil demon named Chthon was coming to Wundagore Mountain. Herbert, being a scientist who didn't believe in magic, despite the werewolf in his basement, thought his old partner had simply lost his mind. Despite not believing Magnus, Herbert followed his advice and trained his new men to have the same moral code as the knights of old in order to help them overcome their beastly natures, and they became the Knights of Wundagore. Around this time, Magneto's runaway and pregnant wife Magda stumbled across the High Evolutionary's lab while in labor. A cow nurse named Bova was instructed to help Magda through her labor, while at the same time the demon Chthon attacked the knights. Several of them died in the effort, but the ghost of Magnus managed to defeat the demon, but not before it managed to touch the newly born Wanda Maximoff, who would grow up to be the Scarlet Witch. Magda feared that if Magneto found her, he would take the children and make them into monsters, so she walked walked off into the mountains, never to be seen again, and the High Evolutionary gave Wanda and her twin brother Pietro up for adoption to a nearby Romani tribe. Although, it should be noted that in the years since this story, it has been heavily retconned so that Wanda and Pietro are not Magneto and Magda's kids and were kidnapped from their real parents by the High Evolutionary to be experimented on, resulting in their powers. So this part isn't canon, I guess, and it also kind of makes the High Evolutionary much more villainous much earlier. So we're gonna keep going with the old version. Leaving Earth. The next part of the High Evolutionary's story comes from his first appearance in Thor number 134 and 135. In this story, Thor is looking for a missing Jane Foster, who has been transported to a random location by an alien conqueror in an effort to distract the god of thunder. Thor tracks Jane to Wundagore and is attacked by the knights, who bring him to the Evolutionary so he can decide what to do with him. Herbert is evolving a wolf, but leaves the lab to see what the deal is with the guy with the hammer. Thor demands Jane's return, and High Evolutionary is like, yeah, she just showed up one day and we've been sheltering her. Take her, I do not care. Unfortunately, Herbert forgot to turn off his machine, so the wolf evolved past the point they were aiming for and became the dreaded man-beast, a creature obsessed with destroying Herbert and any other life that he comes across. Thor helps the knights and Herbert defeat man-beast in the army of highly evolved creatures he creates, and Evolutionary sends them to a distant galaxy where they can start their own society, before taking off with his lab and Knights for Space, where he can continue his work in safety. He leaves Bova behind with Jessica, who would later grow up to be Spider-Woman, thanks to all that spider serum her dad pumped into her. The rocket ended up on an abandoned alien city, and Herbert created a bunch of animal wives for his knights and focuses on his work. While working, he discovers that the knights reverted to savagery and need to be stopped, so he has the Hulk brought to him to help defeat the knights. They succeed, but Herbert is fatally wounded in the process and has no choice but to put himself through 1,000,000 years of evolution to try and survive. He becomes a dumb-looking, floating and glowing form who can see all that ever was or could be, and devolves his knights and sends the Hulk home before taking off to see the universe. After putzing about the universe for a while, Herbert manages to reverse the evolution process so that he is only 100,000 years more evolved than most humans, and decides to create his own Earth to study, creating Counter-Earth. Man-Beast showed up again and taught the people of Counter-Earth violence, ruining the experiment. It was at this moment that Adam Warlock emerged from his cocoon, which Herbert had come into possession of, and volunteered to stop Man-Beast from ruining Counter-Earth. High Evolutionary agreed and gave Adam the Soul Gem to aid him in his quest. High Evolutionary then became a protector for the world he had created, fighting Galactus when he tried to devour Counterworld, and when Counterworld was stolen by the prime movers of Tarkus, Adam Warlock thought that the High Evolutionary had destroyed the planet and tried to kill Herbert with the Soul Gem. The trauma of this caused Herbert not to die, but to take on his godlike evolved form once more, becoming a villain. The High Evolutionary soon returned to his physical form and decided to find out what had happened to Counter-Earth. He learned that the Beyonders had taken Counter-Earth to be a part of a cosmic museum, and realizing how powerless he was in the face of such power, and not being able to deal with the fact that his life's work was being put on display by cosmic beings like a child's crayon drawing being put on a fridge, he decided to end his own life. However, his battle armor prevented all of his attempts, so he decided to pick a fight with the Hulk so that he could break the armor open and he could die. Free of his armor, the High Evolutionary devolved himself into a pile of goo, but his armor soon returned him to life, but the process did cure him of his depression, and he decided that he would help mankind achieve its highest potential, saying, "My encounter with the Beyonders has demonstrated to me that mankind's genetic destiny is not glorious enough. Left to our own natural path, we will never be the equal to the Beyonders. Thus, someone must guide the path of man's evolution and provide a catalyst to further our race's genetic potential. This someone, of course, must be me. I hereby assume proprietorship of man's racial destiny. Under my guidance, the human race will evolve further than the Beyonders, further than any other race of beings in existence, no matter what it takes. I shall not stop until man reigns supreme in all the universe." It was at this point that the High Evolutionary Evolutionary became a villain, using violent methods to attack groups who he determined were evolutionary dead ends.
Welcome back, nerds. Today, I aim to explore the character of Forever Man and prove that he is the oldest Marvel mutant alive, using science, theories, and just the plain old red tape connecting different points in my head. Warning, I am going to lock in, and I know that I sound insane. So, Forever Man. He is thought to be as old as the Earth. That means, going from the start of his life, he could potentially be 4.5 billion years old. But if we are going off of humanity being around, because he is a human, he's 2.8 million. But if we go off the earliest we see him in a comic 5,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, then that is his age. However, it doesn't make sense that this mutant would be theoretically tied to the soul of the Earth from the middle of its journey. Though none of this makes sense, and none of this is actually real, it would make more sense in-universe that Forever Man was the physical manifestation of the Earth, originating with the planet as it formed. Not even going supernova, with literally the power of the sun, could take him down because the Earth still existed. Forever Man has already shown that he will evolve to survive his surroundings by turning into the fire monster after repeated contact with the sun, and he said that his resurrection period used to be days, but has now been reduced to moments, suggesting that he would have had the time to reform at the rate humanity evolved, even from the earliest signs of life on Earth. Now, I am about to get really scientific. It's theorized that the Earth was formed through various collisions of rock and matter, the final of which theoretically happened with another object the size of Mars that resulted in the moon being formed as well. Attaching this idea to the Marvel Universe, maybe the energy was so great that it created the essence of Forever Man. According to the University of Chicago, scientists theorize the planet was suitable for life 4.3 billion years ago. However, the earliest fossils found have been 3.7 billion years old, and that leaves a gap of about 600 million years of question marks. One theory, because we weren't there and we don't actually know, but one theory suggests that in those 600 million years, life formed multiple times but was always wiped out. Whether that be lack of suitable conditions, collisions with asteroids or comets, but my point is, life appearing and then getting wiped out sounds a lot like the concept of Forever Man. Now, in the comic in which Forever Man sought the help of the Avengers to end his eternal suffering, he says that an energy boost unlocked all the memories of his past lives, the earliest we see being ancient Egypt. However, my theory with the character dates back to the earliest organisms known on Earth, microbes. Microbes' memory is cellular. They don't remember a moment, they remember how they adjusted to survive their environment, and then that memory can get passed to the next generation. Moving back to the Avengers comic when Forever Man flew into the sun, his body eventually evolved to withstand the heat of the sun because it remembered what the previous generation of cells did to survive, and it could explain why he didn't recall any more memories past being a human, because that's where his cognitive memory started. However, his body remembers what it needed to do to survive and evolved him with every resurrection to withstand the next condition. Forever Man is the physical manifestation of the theory of evolution, and that is why I believe that he is as old as the Earth. To close this out, now you might be saying, well then how can Forever Man be a mutant if he comes from the beginning of the planet? But I would argue that he is still a mutant because he was from the first aspects of life and was the only one that mutated to resurrect as the being they were. He was a mutant microbe that eventually transformed into like a mutant ape to a mutant human. By the standards we apply to the Marvel X-Men mutants, he might not count, but maybe he is not human or X-Men, but a new secret third thing not yet fully explored in Marvel lore and probably never will be. All of this to say, I don't think the Marvel writers of 1980, JM, Steve, and Bruce that created Forever Man actually thought this deep into it. I'm sure they were just like, what if we created this character that is cursed with eternal immortality and has lived 1,000 lives? Good, let's just run with that. And they didn't even have an age in mind for the character. I personally just got my mind stuck on it and I wanted to talk about it. Anyway, this is very different from anything Nerd has ever done before. Hope the info dump didn't scar you too bad. If you actually listen to all of this, I can't thank you enough, and please leave your thoughts in the comment section down below